The wind howled across the churning waters of the Pacific, whipping waves into frothy peaks that crashed against the hull of the Coast Guard cutter Resolute. A distress call had come in just after midnight. A fishing vessel, the Sea Wanderer, had been caught in a sudden storm 30 miles off the Oregon coast. The crew of 6 was stranded, their boat taking on water faster than they could bail. Time was running out. On the deck of the Resolute, a German shepherd stood steady despite the rolling ship. His name was Zeus, a 4-year-old canine trained by the United States Coast Guard for search and rescue. His dark brown eyes scanned the horizon, ears perked for any sound beyond the storm's roar. Beside him, Petty Officer Second Class Maria Delgado checked the straps on Zeus's harness, her hands steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. "Ready, boy?" she asked, ruffling the fur behind his ears. Zeus gave a low, eager bark, his tail wagging once before he locked his focus back on the mission. Maria smiled. She'd been Zeus's handler for 2 years, and in that time, they'd faced everything from lost hikers to capsized boats. But this storm was one of the worst she'd seen. The Sea Wanderer was out there somewhere, and Zeus's nose was their best hope of finding it before it was too late. Zeus hadn't always been destined for heroics. Born in a small kennel in Idaho, he was the runt of his litter, overlooked by families looking for a pet. But a Coast Guard trainer saw something in the scrappy pup: intelligence, drive, and an uncanny ability to stay calm under pressure. At 6 months old, Zeus began his training, learning to detect human scent over miles of open water, to navigate treacherous terrain, and to signal his handler with precision. By the time he was 2, he was deployed to the Coast Guard's Pacific Northwest Station, where he met Maria. Their bond was instant. Maria, a third-generation coastie, had grown up hearing stories of rescues at sea. She joined the service to honor her family's legacy, but working with Zeus gave her a new sense of purpose. He wasn't just a tool or a teammate. He was her partner, her confidant, the one who never flinched when the stakes were high. The Resolute cut through the waves, its searchlights slicing through the darkness. The crew had narrowed the search area based on the Sea Wanderer's last known coordinates, but the storm had scrambled their radar, and visibility was near zero. Maria and Zeus were on the forward deck, the dog's nose lifted to catch any trace of scent carried by the wind. "Anything, Zeus?" Maria asked, her voice barely audible over the gale. Zeus's head snapped to the left, his body tensing. He let out a sharp bark, then another, his nose pointing toward a patch of sea where the waves seemed to churn even harder. Maria signaled the bridge, and the Resolute adjusted course. "Good boy," she murmured, her heart pounding. Zeus's nose was better than any radar in conditions like these. Human scent could travel miles on the wind, and Zeus was trained to pick it up even in a storm. Minutes later, the searchlight caught something, a faint glint of metal bobbing in the waves. The Sea Wanderer was there, tilted at a dangerous angle, its deck half submerged. Maria could just make out figures clinging to the railing, their life vests glowing faintly in the light. The Resolute couldn't get too close without risking collision, so the crew deployed a rescue swimmer and a small inflatable boat. Maria and Zeus stayed on deck, ready to assist once the survivors were brought aboard. Zeus paced, his eyes never leaving the water, as if willing the rescue team to move faster. The first survivor was hauled onto the Resolute 20 minutes later, a young man, shivering and coughing, his face pale with shock. "There's 5 more," he gasped. "One's hurt bad, legs broken. They're still on the boat." Maria's stomach tightened. The Sea Wanderer was sinking fast. If the rescue team didn't move quickly, The remaining crew would be swept into the sea. Zeus whined, sensing her tension. She knelt beside him, her hand on his back. "We're not done yet, buddy. Stay sharp." The rescue operation stretched into the early hours of the morning. The storm showed no signs of letting up, and the Sea Wanderer's hull was now almost entirely underwater. 4 more survivors were brought aboard, each one battered but alive. The last man, the one with a broken leg, was still trapped on the sinking vessel. His crewmates too exhausted to help him. The rescue swimmer radioed back, his voice strained. "He's pinned under debris. We need to get him out fast, but the boat's breaking apart." Maria looked at Zeus. The dog's training included locating trapped victims, but sending him into the water in these conditions was a risk. The waves could swamp the inflatable boat, or Zeus could be injured by debris. But if they waited, the man would drown. She made her decision. "I'm taking Zeus out there," she told the officer in charge. "He can find the guy faster than we can." The officer hesitated, then nodded. "Be careful, Delgado." Maria and Zeus boarded the inflatable boat with a rescue swimmer, the small craft bouncing wildly on the waves. Zeus stood at the bow, his claws gripping the rubber floor, his nose working overtime. As they neared the Sea Wanderer, Maria clipped a lifeline to Zeus's harness. If the boat capsized, she'd pull him back. "Find him, Zeus!" she shouted over the wind. Zeus leaped onto the tilting deck of the Sea Wanderer, his movements sure despite the slick surface. Maria followed, her flashlight sweeping the wreckage. Zeus darted toward the stern, barking sharply to signal he'd found something. Maria scrambled after him, her heart in her throat. There, half buried under a collapsed fishing net and a broken crate, was the missing crewman. His face was gray, his leg twisted at an unnatural angle, but he was alive. Zeus stood over him, barking to guide Maria and the rescue swimmer to the spot. "Hold on, we've got you," Maria said, helping the swimmer clear the debris. Zeus stayed close, his presence a steadying force as they worked. The man groaned as they freed him, but he managed to grip Maria's arm as they lifted him. The deck shuddered beneath them, a final warning that the Sea Wanderer was going under. Maria clipped Zeus's harness to her own belt, and together they carried the injured man to the inflatable boat. The rescue swimmer took the controls, and they sped back to the Resolute just as the fishing vessel vanished beneath the waves. Back on the Resolute, the survivors were wrapped in blankets, given hot coffee, and tended to by the medical team. The man with the broken leg was stabilized and airlifted to a hospital. The crew of the Sea Wanderer was shaken but alive, thanks to the Resolute's team and Zeus. Maria sat on the deck, exhausted, with Zeus curled up beside her. His fur was still damp, but he looked content, his head resting on her knee. She scratched his ears, her voice soft. "You did good, Zeus. Real good." One of the survivors, the young man who'd been rescued first, approached her. "That dog, he saved us," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "If he hadn't found us when he did." Maria smiled, her hand still on Zeus's head. "That's what he does. That's what we do." Zeus and Maria went on to serve together for 3 more years, completing dozens of missions along the Pacific coast. From locating lost kayakers to finding survivors in the aftermath of hurricanes, Zeus's nose and Maria's determination saved countless lives. When Zeus retired at the age of 8, he moved in with Maria, spending his days lounging in her backyard and chasing the occasional squirrel. But his legacy lived on. The Coast Guard honored Zeus with a commendation for his service, and his story inspired a new generation of canine handlers. Maria, now a chief petty officer, trained other dogs, but she always told them the same thing: "You've got big paws to fill." On quiet nights, when the sea was calm and the stars reflected on the water, Maria would sit with Zeus and tell him stories of their adventures. And Zeus, ever the faithful partner, would listen, his eyes bright with the memory of the lives they'd saved together.